Welcome to Quick Movie Recaps. Today, we will review a crime fiction movie named Boston Strangler from 2023. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and subscribe. The movie begins in Michigan in the year 1965. A man working late at night hears noises of scuffle and screams from his neighbor's apartment and calls the cops. After not getting any response, the cops break into the apartment and find a woman's partially naked dead body. In the next scene, we are taken to Boston in 1963. A woman named Loretta McLaughlin is having breakfast with her family while reading and cutting snippets from newspapers. Later, Loretta goes to her office. She is a reporter at the Record American, a newspaper company, and often faces sexism. Despite her requests, her boss, Jack, doesn't let her cover the crime stories because she's a woman. Soon Loretta discovers that a woman was found dead in her apartment last night. A nurse enters the office and Loretta asks her colleague who is she. He tells her that she is Jean Cole, a fellow reporter who is working undercover to get a story on nursery homes. In the evening, Loretta goes to her mother's apartment to give her some groceries. That's when Loretta's mother tells her that her neighbor Mrs. Slezers, who lived around the corner, got killed. Then, Loretta visits the crime scene. Next day, Loretta tells her boss that 3 women were strangled to death over the last 2 weeks. She also somehow convinces him to let her cover this story. Then, she goes to meet a man who found the body of Ida Erga, one of the 3 strangled women. He tells her that there were stockings tied to Ida's neck like a bow. Later, Loretta goes to the police station to meet the cops who are working on Anna Slezer's case. But instead of helping her out, an officer sends her away. Next morning, Loretta shares it all with Jack and he somehow arranged the 3rd victim's autopsy for Loretta. Soon, Loretta gets to see Helen Blake's autopsy. Later, Loretta meets Officer Dugan to find more information about Anna Slezer's case. However, the officer does not respond properly. After confirming all 3 deaths and similarities to the murder pattern, Loretta publishes in the newspaper. She is also praised by her husband. However, Commissioner McNamara meets Jack and lies to him that Loretta did not introduce herself as a reporter and also accuses her of flirting with the cops. This upsets Jack and he confronts Loretta. He stops her from following or covering this crime case. When she returns home, Loretta overhears her husband and his sister's conversation. Later, Loretta asks her husband why he never stops her from working. He says that people don't understand her passion, but he does. The next day, Loretta gets the news that another woman was strangled to death. On the other hand, Jean gets a call from the office that she needs to work on the case of strangled women with Loretta. Soon, both of the women start working together and after confirming the 4th death, Loretta publishes the news. Later, another woman gets strangled to death and Jean and Loretta confirm the 5th strangler murder. When Jean and Loretta are working on the story, one of the colleagues comes and tells them that he has to take their pictures for a byline in the newspaper. While Loretta hesitates and denies doing any stunt, Jean somehow convinces her. Loretta writes how all these murders were connected and the women are in danger as the killer is still out there. On New Year's Eve, Loretta receives a call from Jean that another strangler victim is found, but this time it was a young girl. Loretta's husband doesn't want Loretta to go but reassures her that he'll manage everything. Jean gets more information from the neighbor who somehow dodged a strange man, seemingly the murderer. Later that night, Loretta's husband asks her why they needed to print her and Jean's pictures in the newspaper as the lunatic killer is still out there. Just then the home landline rings and when Loretta picks up the call, there is heavy breathing but no response. Next day, Loretta meets Officer Conley from Boston Police and asks him about the case. Some more young girls get strangled in the Boston area. Jean gets to know that Patricia was pregnant at the time of her death from her autopsy report. Then, Jean goes to her office and asks her colleague about Patricia's love life. Later the colleague secretly meets Jean at a restaurant. She tells Jean that Patricia was pregnant with her boss, Nielsen's illegitimate child, and he wanted her to get an abortion. Meanwhile, Loretta meets Beverly's mother, another strangler victim. That's what leads Loretta to her college. Beverly's friend reveals that her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Marsh, was harassing her these days. At night, Loretta goes to meet Daniel Marsh but gets scared of his strange behavior and runs away. Later, Loretta gives Officer Conley a report on Patricia and Beverly's murders. The police catch Nielsen while removing evidence from Patricia's apartment. The next day, Officer Conley tells Loretta how Nielsen failed 2 polygraph tests but the district attorney does not think he has anything to do with Patricia's murder. Then Loretta and Jean tell Jack and Roland that Boston police won't coordinate and they are intentionally missing the clues between these murders. However, Jack and Roland don't want to go against the police department. At night Loretta's husband tells her that he has got a promotion but now he'll work in Connecticut a few days a week. He tells her she'll need to put her share, which upsets Loretta. She thinks he wants her to quit the job and they get into a fight. Next morning, Loretta gets a call from Detective Linsky from the New York City Police Department, telling her about the murder happened in New York a few days ago. He tells Loretta about a captured suspect named Paul Dempsey, who confessed his crimes. Linsky adds that the Boston Police Department isn't cooperating with them. Then Jean and Loretta tell Jack about how Paul Dempsey could be the original strangler, but Boston police won't look into it. Despite Holland's disapproval, Jack allows Loretta to publish about this. Everyone starts to question the Boston police's credibility, and Deputy Attorney General John Bottomley gets hired to see the investigation. One night when Loretta is alone with her children at home, she sees a mysterious man standing outside her house in the dark. She gets scared, but she finds something in the mail slot. Next day she tells this to Jean and shows her their pictures, red crosses on their faces. Jean gets upset and shouts at Holland. She asks him to stop with this stunt and get their pictures removed from the newspaper. Later Loretta meets Detective Linsky. He tells her that a few weeks ago they got a call about a guy named Albert DeSalvo who was harassing some girls in their apartment. Boston police did not share any information with us. So, they had to let him go. He also adds that Albert DeSalvo is famous in Cambridge for his history. So, Loretta visits the Cambridge police station. The cop tells Loretta Albert DeSalvo is a creep. He also tells her that DeSalvo was arrested on rape charges in Malden and he is in police custody at Bridgewater right now. Loretta gets to know that DeSalvo has two cons: the green man because he would wear green workman's clothes to pose as the maintenance guy, and the measuring man because he'd pretend to be a modeling scout to trap girls. Loretta figures out that it was DeSalvo who killed the women. But when she talks to Officer Conley, he tells her that it cannot be DeSalvo because he was in prison when the first 6 murders happened. Loretta discusses it with Jean and she suggests checking the actual release records. Then it is revealed that DeSalvo petitioned for early release and was released just 2 months before the first murder. Loretta publishes the news and DeSalvo becomes the talk of the town. Next day, Jack tells Loretta that DeSalvo has hired F. Lee Bailey. Later, Loretta meets Officer Conley to discuss DeSalvo getting a high-priced defense lawyer. Conley reveals that his lawyer did not let the police talk to DeSalvo. So, he took Sophie Clark's neighbor to identify DeSalvo. But instead of DeSalvo, she identified someone named George Nasser who has been in custody for over a year. Then, Loretta joins a press conference where Bailey tells the media that he has obtained DeSalvo's confession and they are negotiating on it. Then Deputy Attorney General Bottomley takes DeSalvo's confession of committing the Strangler murders. Next day, Officer Conley tells Loretta that DeSalvo's confession isn't allowed to be used in the court and Bailey has got DeSalvo a 5-figure book deal. The next morning, Loretta talks to Jack and Jean. Jack says that Loretta has to no longer write about Boston Strangler as the case is already solved with DeSalvo's confession. Even Jean tells Loretta that she has started working on a new assignment. This upsets Loretta, but Jean promises her that if another murder happens, she will be there with Loretta. Loretta comes home and sees her husband watching TV. She asks him if the kids are asleep. He says yes, and then Loretta goes to her daughter's room where she finds some snippets and Loretta's pictures cut out of newspapers in her daughter's diary. She understands how her daughter is so proud of her mother. In the next scene, we come back to Michigan in 1965 where police had found a woman's dead body. Next day, Detective DeLine from Michigan State Police calls Loretta and informs her that they had found 6 women strangled near Ann Arbor and the 6th victim was found last night. Then he asks her if she still thinks that Albert DeSalvo is the murderer. At night, when Loretta starts to pack her things to go to Michigan, her husband asks her when this all stops and then tells her to be careful, showing concern. Next day, Loretta goes to meet Detective DeLine who shows her case files. Later, Loretta sees Danielle Marsh and a picture of protesters in Ann Arbor. She tells Detective DeLine that Danielle was one of her prime suspects for Strangler murders. DeLine says that Dr. Roby from Bridgewater State Hospital had also reported him. Loretta talks to Dr. Roby who reveals that Daniel Marsh was one of his patients. Upon Loretta's request, Jean gets more information and tells Loretta that Daniel was arrested for assaulting his girlfriend. Dr. Roby evaluated him and he was at Bridgewater for 3 months in the same ward with DeSalvo. Then Daniel Marsh is arrested by the police. Next we see Loretta calls the police station and gets to know that Officer Conley has quit his job. She then goes to meet him and asks him to give her a copy of DeSalvo's confession tapes. He says that he doesn't have it and tells her to focus on her own life because her efforts will go in vain as no one cares about it. The next day, Loretta finds a parcel on her desk with "To my sister Sally" written on it. She opens it up and plays the tapes. While Loretta is listening to the DeSalvo's confession tapes, Jean joins her. That's when Loretta notices that DeSalvo is guessing answers and Bottomley shows DeSalvo the crime scene photos during his confession. Then Loretta goes to meet Albert DeSalvo's brother Richard. Richard tells Loretta that DeSalvo loves his family. Loretta asks him that DeSalvo must talk to her if they want her to help them and Richard agrees. Next morning, Loretta gets a call from DeSalvo. He tells her that he is not going to talk about his crime story for free as he has a family to support and that he had already got screwed over the book deal earlier. Loretta tells him why he does not want the truth come out and how can he let them get away with it. So, DeSalvo asks her to come and meet him tomorrow. Right after that, DeSalvo is killed by another unknown prisoner. Next day, Loretta goes there after getting the news of DeSalvo's death to get more information, but that's when another woman, seemingly a patient, comes and hands over Loretta the address of a person who knows everything. Loretta goes to meet that person named Harrison. Harrison reveals that he and DeSalvo were in the same ward. In fact, Daniel Marsh and George Nasser were always with DeSalvo and they coached him with a stack of newspaper clippings. They wanted the reward money and that's why George Nasser got his lawyer, F. Lee Bailey, involved. They told DeSalvo that they would get him a book deal. So, he will be rich and support his family. Later, Loretta goes to meet George Nasser, who is still in prison. Nasser reveals to Loretta that he only helped DeSalvo remember his crimes because 13 murders are way too much to remember. But he also says that people wanted to believe that it was DeSalvo behind all these murders because the reality is bitter and they don't want to digest that. Loretta asks what is it and then he tells her that men kill women and there are many DeSalvos out there. So the killing of innocent did not start with DeSalvo nor it end with him. After thorough research, Loretta tells Jack that according to Dr. Grayson, all killers have a type. As the first 5 murders were all elderly women, Paul Dempsey had a type that was elderly women. As for DeSalvo, he was mentally retarded. He knew about the murders through newspapers and Bottomley, who wanted to solve the case even by getting a fake confession. When Paul Dempsey moved to New York, the strangler started killing young women. However, some other men used the strangler as cover to kill women. Like the secretary killed by her boss because she was pregnant with his illegitimate child. DeSalvo was used by everyone as a way out. He was coached by Nasser and Marsh to get reward money. No one wanted to get to the truth and many murderers got away. Then Loretta publishes the story. Everyone starts asking the police commissioner about strangler murders. He just says that all strangler murder cases are still open, suggesting that the investigation will go on. But Daniel Marsh was never charged with any of the murders. George Nasser is still in prison and only DeSalvo was linked to the 13th murder through DNA evidence in 2013, but the other 12 murders remain unsolved. Which part of the story did you like the most? Tell us in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.